Welcome to Victor Narrates Reddit. Like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments. Now, let's begin. My wife mocked me in front of her family, saying I can't please anyone. After 6 years of paying for her luxury life, I left her, and now she's begging me for financial help. Henry, 34 years old, didn't want to hear that. I swear I wasn't trying to eavesdrop or anything like that. I was simply in the kitchen washing dishes while Renata, 32, my wife of 6 years, hosted her friends and family in our home. It was a Saturday night, and I had spent most of the day helping prepare for the dinner party she had been organizing for weeks. I made the steaks medium rare, exactly how her dad likes them. I helped clean the entire house, following her instructions to the letter, and I even put out those absurd decorative towels in the bathroom that apparently no one is ever supposed to use. The dinner went very well. I sat, smiled when it was appropriate, laughed at her brother-in-law's terrible jokes, and made sure no one's drink was ever empty. In short, I was the perfect husband, as always. When we finished eating, I offered to clean up while everyone moved to the living room for dessert and coffee. No one objected. In fact, no one even thanked me. It was simply assumed that I would do it. I was in the kitchen, my arms almost up to my elbows in soapy water, only half listening to the conversation drifting in from the living room. Everyone was laughing. It was the kind of laughter that always managed to make me feel like an outsider, even in my own home. And Beth, Renata's sister, has a very particular laugh, like a hyena who had smoked 2 packs a day for 20 years. I'd recognize it anywhere. She was by far the one laughing the loudest. Then I heard Renata's voice rise above the others. He can't please anyone anyway. That's what she said. She said it so casually, as if she were stating something everyone had known for a long time. And then they all burst out laughing as if they completely agreed with her. Even her mom, who I always thought liked me. The same woman I had helped move apartments the month before, spending an entire weekend carrying heavy furniture up 3 flights of stairs because the elevator was broken. I stood frozen, gripping the sink so tightly my knuckles turned white, a plate still dripping in my hands. I'm not a small guy. I played rugby in college and still go to the gym 4 times a week. But in that moment, I felt tiny. I waited for her to say it was a joke, to add a "just kidding" or a "but he really does try so hard." She never did. She just changed the subject as if she hadn't just punched me in the gut with those words. I finished washing that plate, dried it carefully, and put it in the cupboard. Then I washed another, and another. I did it mechanically, focusing only on the simple task, as if keeping my hands busy could stop me from thinking about what I had just heard. But her words kept echoing in my head. He can't please anyone anyway. The worst part was this wasn't the first time. It was just the first time I had truly paid attention. It was as if someone had finally adjusted the focus on a camera that had been blurry for years. Suddenly, everything became perfectly clear. Every dismissive comment, every eye roll, every sigh of disappointment, it had all been there from the beginning. The only one who didn't want to see it was me. But before I tell you what happened next, let me give you a little context. Renata and I met when I was 26 and she was 24. I was working as a financial advisor at a mid-sized firm, earning a decent salary, though nothing extraordinary. I was no Wall Street executive, just a regular guy helping regular people plan for their retirement. And honestly, I was good at my job. I had a knack for explaining complicated financial topics without making people's eyes glaze over. I met Renata at a mutual friend's wedding. She was a bridesmaid, and I was a groomsman. The classic setup to get 2 people to meet, right? She was a gorgeous blonde who worked in marketing for a luxury clothing brand. She was completely out of my league, or so I thought. When she agreed to dance with me at the reception, I was convinced our friend had persuaded her to do it. And when she gave me her number at the end of the night, I was sure it was fake. It wasn't. We went out the following weekend. I spent 3 hours getting ready for that first date. 3 hours. For someone who usually just throws on the first clean thing they find, that says a lot. I tried on every decent shirt I owned. I got a haircut the day before, and I even looked up the restaurant online to make sure it was a nice enough place to take her. The date went really well. She laughed at my jokes. She kept touching my arm. All those signals that make you think someone is genuinely interested in you. I couldn't believe it. I kept waiting for the catch, for her to tell me at any moment that it was all a bet or a cruel joke. But the first date led to a second, then a third, and before I knew it, we were an official couple. Looking back now, I realized the red flags were always there. On our fourth date, I took her to an Italian restaurant I loved. It was a family-owned place with incredible food, though nothing fancy. While we were eating, she commented that she usually went to the restaurant downtown, one that cost 3 times as much. When I gave her flowers for Valentine's Day, she mentioned that her ex always bought them from a very exclusive florist I had never even heard of. They were small things I chose to ignore because, well, it was Renata, and I just felt grateful she was with me. We got married 2 years later. I thought I had hit the jackpot. My parents adored her. My mom, especially, was thrilled that I had found someone so successful and so beautiful. Her parents, on the other hand, barely tolerated me. They never said anything outright, but there was always this feeling that they thought Renata could have done better. Her dad was a very successful surgeon. Her mom came from a family with a lot of money. I was a middle-class guy with student loans and a Honda Civic. After we got married, everything moved very quickly. We bought a house in a neighborhood that, to be honest, we couldn't afford. But Renata insisted it was where we needed to live to network with the right people and advance her career. I worked like a madman to give her the life she wanted. I spent weeks working 60-hour shifts to keep moving up in the company so I could pay for the kitchen remodel she so desperately wanted, the vacations to resorts in Mexico, and the designer handbags. I'm not saying I didn't enjoy those things too, but most of the time I did it for her. I remember a vacation in Cancun, a 5-star resort, a room with an ocean view, all-inclusive. That trip cost me almost a full month's salary. I spent practically the whole vacation worried about money, but seeing her happy, truly happy, made me feel like it had all been worth it. She spent the entire week posting photos on Instagram. Blessed. My husbandal way spoils him. Living my best life. Now I can see how it all started, little by little. A comment here, a look there, the way she would sigh when I gave her a gift, the way she constantly compared me to her friends' husbands. Garrett took Nadia to Paris for their anniversary. Declan just got promoted to vice president. She always found a way to make me feel like I wasn't measuring up, and like an idiot, I just tried even harder. By our 5th year of marriage, I was completely exhausted. I felt like I was constantly walking on eggshells, trying to guess what would make her happy and what would set her off. We went to therapy for a while. It was her idea after I forgot our anniversary. I remember sitting in that office, listening to her list, one by one, all the ways she felt I had failed her. And there I was, nodding, convinced she was right, promising I would do better. The therapist, a woman around our age with huge glasses, asked Renata what she valued most about me. There was a long silence, too long. Finally, she answered, "He's very reliable, and he's good with money." She said it as if she were describing a Honda Civic. Reliable, economical, and practical. Nothing exciting, but it gets the job done. We stopped going to therapy after the 3rd session. Renata said the therapist was clearly on my side because she had also suggested that Renata improve her communication skills. God forbid anyone suggest that Renata wasn't perfect. By the time that dinner party came around, we had been living like 2 strangers under the same roof for months. I worked, went to the gym, came home, and watched TV in the basement while she lived her life upstairs. We hadn't been intimate and I don't even remember how long. At least several months. I tried to get close to her a few times, but her rejections had become increasingly cruel. So, over time, I just stopped trying. It wasn't a marriage anymore. It was some kind of arrangement. I provided the lifestyle. She provided. Well, honestly, I didn't even know what she provided anymore. I guess the image of a perfect life for her Instagram followers. After everyone left that night, I couldn't sleep. Renata fell asleep almost immediately, as always. By 11:30 p.m., she was sound asleep, no matter what had happened during the day. I lay beside her, staring at the ceiling as her words replayed over and over in my head. He can't please anyone anyway. The most ironic part was that if there was anyone who could never be pleased, it was Renata. Yet, she had managed to make it seem like I was the problem, that I was never satisfied with anything, and that I was incapable of pleasing others. The truth was very different. I had always considered myself a very easy person to please. I didn't need luxuries. I was happy with a pizza and a beer while watching a game with my friends. The simple things were enough for me, and apparently, everyone who knew us had bought into her version of the story. I started to remember all the times she had made me feel small. Every eye roll, every sigh when something didn't go exactly as she wanted, every sarcastic comment at my expense. Her birthday from the previous year came to mind. I had planned a surprise weekend getaway to Napa. I researched wineries, found a boutique hotel with excellent reviews, and even booked a private wine tasting. When I showed her the itinerary I had been working on for weeks, she barely sighed and said, "Couldn't you have booked the resort I showed you instead of this?" I also remembered the time I cooked her a steak after taking a cooking class to improve. She always criticized my cooking, so I practiced for weeks to get the perfect sear and prepare a rather elaborate red wine reduction. She took one bite, made a face, and pushed the plate away without a word. She simply ordered takeout, as if all the effort I had put in meant absolutely nothing. I also remembered her company party. She had been worried for weeks because her boss would be there. I put on my best suit and spent almost half an hour just adjusting my tie to make it perfect. As we were about to leave, she looked me up and down and said, "That tie doesn't match the shirt, but oh well, we're already late." I spent the entire night convinced that everyone was staring at my supposedly disastrous combination. And then more memories started flooding in, one after another. Every moment she had made me feel insignificant in our marriage. The time she corrected the way I pronounced the name of a wine in front of her friends. The occasions when she answered questions that had been asked to me, as if she couldn't trust me to speak for myself. The way she would review my work emails before I sent them to make sure they sounded professional enough. The criticism never ended. My haircut, my posture, the way I loaded the dishwasher. And yet, I kept trying. I kept convincing myself that she was just stressed, that she didn't really mean things the way they sounded, or that if I just tried a little harder, one day she would look at me the same way I had always looked at her. But lying there that night, watching her sleep so peacefully as if nothing had happened, I finally understood. It was never about me doing something wrong. The problem was that nothing I did would ever be enough for her. I wasn't the problem. I never had been. For the first time since we got married, I felt real anger. Not the fleeting frustration that comes during an argument, but a deep, silent fury that had been building for years. I had given her everything, my time, my energy, my soul, and all she had done was take and take, while convincing me that I was the selfish one, the difficult one, the one who was never satisfied. I got out of bed around 3 in the morning, trying not to wake her. I went downstairs to the living room, the same room where just hours before I had been humiliated without even knowing it. I poured myself a drink and sat in the dark. And for the first time in a very long time, I thought about what I wanted. Not what would make Renata happy, not how to avoid another one of her disappointments, just what I, Henry, truly wanted. And what I wanted was to leave. I woke up the next morning on the sofa with a completely stiff neck. For a few seconds, I was disoriented. Then, everything from the previous night came rushing back, accompanied by a strange sense of clarity. I wasn't hungover. I'd only had one drink, but something inside me had changed. I looked at the clock. It was 6:15 a.m. Renata wouldn't be up for several hours. It was Sunday. She loved to sleep in until at least 9, and then spend another hour scrolling on her phone before even thinking about getting out of bed. I got up, showered, and left the house. I didn't leave a note. I didn't text her to say where I was going. I just put on my shoes and left for a couple of hours. When I returned, Renata was in the kitchen. She was still in her silk pajamas, her hair perfectly messy, as if she had just stepped out of a shampoo commercial, even though she had just woken up. She had that expression I knew all too well, the one that meant I was in trouble. "Where were you?" she asked, her tone demanding. "I woke up and you were gone. No note, no message, nothing." Before, I would have started apologizing immediately. I would have given her 1,000 explanations, made up excuses, and promised I would never worry her like that again. But that morning, I just opened the refrigerator, took out a bottle of water, and drank half of it before answering. I just went out. For over 2 hours? Her voice had that edge that usually made me try to fix things as quickly as possible. Yes, I started making breakfast calmly, without looking at her and without letting myself get drawn into her anger. I needed you here, she said. My parents are coming over later, and I wanted you to help me move the living room furniture. I want to try a layout I saw in Architectural Digest. That was so typical of Renata. She made plans that involved my time and effort without even bothering to ask if I could or wanted to do it. She just assumed I would drop everything to fulfill her latest whim. Before, I would have left my breakfast half-eaten to help her. This time, I said, I'll help you when I'm done eating. She looked at me as if I had just said the craziest thing in the world. But they'll be here in 2 hours. That's more than enough time. I continued preparing my breakfast with the same calm. Besides, if it was so urgent, you could have texted me. I shouldn't have to text my own husband to know where he's supposed to be, she retorted irritably. I finished making my breakfast, turned to her, and looked her directly in the eyes. And where am I supposed to be, Renata? Available for you 24/7? Her eyes widened. In 6 years of marriage, I had never spoken to her like that. In fact, I rarely spoke like that to anyone. I had always been the peacemaker, the pleaser, the man who would rather swallow his feelings than cause a conflict. What's gotten into you? She asked, this time in a much lower, almost insecure voice. Nothing's wrong with me. I paused. I'm just tired. Now I'm going to eat breakfast. After I ate, I helped her move the living room furniture, but I did it my way. I suggested a different layout from the one she had seen in the magazine, one that actually made better use of the space we had. To my surprise, she didn't argue. She just watched me with a strange expression, as if she were seeing me for the first time. Shortly after, her parents arrived. I was polite, but no longer subservient as I had been for so many years. When her father started with one of his usual digs about my job, "How's that financial planning thing going? Still telling people to save for retirement?" he asked with that same condescending laugh. This time, I didn't smile or bow my head. "It's going very well, Vincent." I called him by his first name instead of sir, as I always did. In fact, last month, I helped a client manage a 7-figure inheritance and save them about $150,000 in taxes thanks to good financial planning. Vincent blinked. It was clear he didn't expect me to respond. "Well, good for you," he finally said. The rest of the visit was a bit tense, but without major incidents. As soon as her parents left, Renata turned to me. "What was all that?" she asked. "What are you talking about?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about. You were different with my dad." I thought about making an excuse, saying I was stressed from work, that I wasn't feeling well, anything to avoid the real conversation. But I was tired of avoiding things. "I heard what you said last night." She frowned, looking genuinely confused. "What did I say?" "You said, he can't please anyone anyway." I repeated her words exactly as she had said them. Her expression changed in a matter of seconds. First confusion, then recognition, and finally defensiveness. That was nothing. It was just a joke. It didn't sound like a joke, and nobody laughed like it was one. "You're being overly sensitive," she replied, waving her hand dismissively. "It wasn't a big deal. It was a big deal to me." My voice came out calm but firm, and it made me realize something. I paused before continuing. "You don't respect me, Renata. You haven't for a long time. If you ever did." She scoffed in disbelief. "That's ridiculous." "Of course, I respect you." I slowly shook my head. "No, you don't. You criticize everything I do. You belittle me in front of your friends and family. You make me feel like I'm never enough, like I'm always failing at something." "I don't do that," she insisted. But there was a flicker in her eyes. Maybe it was guilt, or maybe just annoyance at being called out. "You do," I said. "And I've allowed it because I've been so desperate for your approval that I ended up losing myself." I spent a hand through my hair. I felt exhausted and at the same time, strangely liberated. "But I'm tired of it now." "And what is that supposed to mean?" she asked, her voice rising slightly. "It means I'm not going to live my life trying to please you anymore. It means I'm going to start living for myself again, not to earn your approval." She stared at me for a long moment. Then her expression hardened. "Is this some kind of midlife crisis? Are you going to buy a motorcycle and start wearing leather jackets now?" I almost laughed at how predictable her response was. Discredit me immediately. Make me feel ridiculous for daring to stand up for myself. "No, Renata, What's happening is that I'm finally seeing our marriage clearly. And I've also realized that I deserve better than being your emotional punching bag. You're exaggerating. She said it firmly, but I caught a flicker of fear in her eyes. She was losing control over the image she had built of me, and she didn't like it at all. Maybe, I replied. But I'm done. That night, I slept in the guest room, and the next night too. Renata alternated between icy silence and constant attempts to provoke a fight. I didn't fall for either. I was polite but distant, as if we were two roommates and not a married couple. That was the beginning of the end, though at that moment, I wasn't fully aware of it. Over the following weeks, I maintained my new attitude. I wasn't trying to be cruel. I wasn't playing games or seeking revenge. I had simply stopped bending over backward for someone who never made the slightest effort to meet me halfway. At home, I stopped walking on eggshells. If she made a sarcastic comment, I no longer argued or tried to convince her she was wrong. I just let her words hang in the air until she understood I wasn't going to react. "That shirt makes it look like you're trying too hard," she commented one morning as I was getting dressed for work. Before, I would have changed it immediately. This time, I just looked at her, shrugged, and replied, "I like it." Then I went downstairs to make breakfast. I also stopped breaking the silences every time she sighed dramatically, waiting for me to ask what was wrong. I stopped apologizing for things that weren't my fault. I stopped sacrificing my comfort for hers. And that's when she really started to realize something had changed. At first, she dropped little hints. "You've been acting so weird lately. What's wrong with you? You've been pretty unpleasant lately." I think at first she thought it was just a phase, that I was just in a bad mood or going through a rough patch. But as days turned into weeks, she understood this wasn't temporary. I was no longer the same man, and it was driving her crazy. She tried different strategies. The first was seduction. After weeks of acting like I barely existed, she suddenly started walking around the house in lingerie, accidentally brushing against me in the kitchen, and suggesting we shower together. I'm not made of stone. If I'm being honest, a part of me wanted to give in. And not just for the physical desire, but also because it would have been so easy to go back to our old dynamic, sex, a brief period where it seemed like everything was fine, and then, little by little, a return to the emotional manipulation and control. But I didn't give in. I remained kind, though distant. "Not today." Those two words became my standard response. Each time I rejected her, she seemed more surprised than the last. In her worldview, a man's sexual desire was something to be used to control him. If you offered it, he would do anything. If you denied it, he would keep chasing you. The idea that I could say no again and again simply didn't fit into her way of thinking. When seduction failed, she changed tactics. She started trying to make me feel guilty. She would mention my parents, who had always adored her. "Your mom called today," she'd say with feigned indifference. She asked how we were doing. I didn't know what to tell her. Or she'd drop comments like, "Don't you think your dad would be disappointed to see you behaving this way?" This part was harder to resist. My parents had raised me to believe that marriage was forever, that you worked through problems, you didn't run from them. The thought of disappointing them weighed on me. But then I would remember all those years of subtle humiliation, of feeling like I was never enough, and my resolve would return. "My parents just wanted to be happy," I would reply. "That's all that matters to them." When guilt didn't work, she moved on to another strategy: fear. "You know something?" she said one night after another failed attempt to get me to tell her what was really going on. "You're never going to find anyone like me." The words came out of my mouth before I could even think. God, I hope so. Her face fell. For a moment, I felt terrible, but then her expression hardened again. "You really think you'll be better off without me? Good luck with that. You'll be begging me to take you back in less than a month." I shook my head. "I don't think I'm better than you, Renata. I just think I deserve better than this, than us." Just like that? 6 years of marriage, and you just give up? I'm not giving up. I'm just accepting a truth that's been staring us in the face for a long time. We don't make each other happy. We haven't for years, if we ever did. She didn't respond, and I think it was because, deep down, she knew I was right. From then on, she started testing me. She'd throw out little comments to see if she could get a reaction. You never do anything right. You'd be completely lost without me. God, you're such an impossible person. Before, I would have rushed to defend myself. I would have done everything possible to prove her wrong, to convince her that I was good enough. Not anymore. Now, I would just look at her, let her words fade into the air, and continue with what I was doing, because they no longer had any power over me. The first time I did that, I saw something different in her face. It wasn't anger, nor frustration. It was uncertainty. And that's when I understood something. She had never controlled me through yelling or threats. She had controlled me through expectations. Over time, she had molded me, wearing me down bit by bit, like water on a stone, until I became someone who never questioned anything, never objected, and never existed outside of what she needed me to be. But that Henry was gone, and she had no idea how to deal with the man I was becoming. One weekend, about 2 months after everything changed between us, I decided to visit my brother in Chicago. He had been inviting me for months to see his new house, but Renata always found a reason to postpone the trip. We were too busy, it wasn't the right time, she didn't get along with my sister-in-law. There was always an excuse. This time, I just bought the plane ticket. On Monday, I told her that I would be leaving on Friday and coming back on Sunday. You're going to Chicago this weekend? She was completely baffled. But we have the Andersons' dinner party on Saturday. The Andersons were her boss and his wife. Very important for her career, completely irrelevant to mine. You have the Andersons' dinner party, I corrected her. I'll be in Chicago. You can't just not go. Why not? Because Preston specifically asked if you would be there. He wants to talk to you about his retirement planning. He has my email. You can tell him to write to me or explain that I already had another commitment. She frowned. Another commitment? You just decided this. I shook my head calmly. No, Renata. My brother has been asking me to visit for months. I've been putting it off for your convenience. I'm not doing that anymore. So you're going to embarrass me in front of my boss? You expect me to go alone? Like I'm a single woman? You're not single. I looked at her steadily. You're married to someone who also has his own life and his own family. And sometimes, those things aren't going to line up with your work commitments. She looked at me as if I had just said the most outrageous thing in the world. The idea that my needs or my family could ever take priority over hers was something she couldn't even conceive of. Finally, she spoke in a low voice, but one heavy with a threat. If you go this weekend, don't bother coming back. I held her gaze for a few seconds. Do you really want to go there, Renata? Are you resorting to ultimatums? It's not an ultimatum, she said. It's a fact. If you choose your brother over me, over our marriage, then this is over. I took a deep breath before answering. My brother isn't a choice. He's my family, just like your sister has never been a choice for you. The fact that you see my desire to maintain a relationship with my own brother as some kind of betrayal says a lot about where we've ended up. That's not what I meant, she backtracked, lowering her tone slightly. Of course, you can go see your brother, just not this weekend. Not when it's so important that we're at that dinner. Important for you, I corrected. Not for us, and certainly not for me. My career matters too, Henry. I never said it didn't, but my family matters too, and my life beyond being your husband matters too. She threw her hands up in frustration. I don't even know who you are anymore. I looked at her for a few seconds before replying. That's precisely the problem, Renata. I'm not sure you ever did. I went to Chicago that weekend. While I was there, Renata alternated between angry messages, demanding I return immediately, and others saying she was deeply hurt because, according to her, I had abandoned her. I didn't respond to any of them. Then came the anger. One night, a few days after I got back, I was sitting on the sofa watching a game and having a beer, completely relaxed. She was pacing back and forth in the living room, huffing under her breath. You could tell she'd been holding back for a while until she finally exploded. You don't even care about this marriage anymore, do you? I looked at her in silence. I could have said many things. I could have denied it. I could have tried to reassure her, as I always did. I could have pretended one more time to avoid an argument. But I didn't want to do that anymore. Not the way it is now, I replied. That was all I said, and it was enough. She completely lost it. She didn't get violent. but she reacted in a way that made it clear she had finally understood she no longer had any control over me. She called me cold, selfish, distant. She said I had changed, that I wasn't the same person. And then she said the sentence that hit me the most. "You're not the man I married." That made me pause. I looked at her steadily, and for the first time in a long time, I completely agreed with her. "No, I'm not. That man let you walk all over him for years. I'm done living like that." The color drained from her face. In 6 years of marriage, she had never heard me speak to her that way. 3 weeks after that conversation, a courier arrived at my office with divorce papers, the documents with which Renata was formally initiating the process. So typical of Renata, trying to embarrass me in front of my colleagues. I just signed them, thanked the courier, and went back to my meeting. My boss, who had met Renata at several company events and never quite warmed to her, just gave me a slight nod of approval. That same weekend, I moved out. I found a nice apartment, much closer to the office. I thought I would be devastated, but what I felt, mostly, was relief. I started sleeping better, smiling more, and my friends noticed too. "Dude, you're like your old self again," Trevor told me one night over beers. And I realized he was right. Little by little, I was getting back to the man I was before I met Renata. I started feeling confident in myself again, relaxed, able to enjoy life without being obsessed with constantly living up to someone else's expectations. I hired a good lawyer and prepared for a legal battle. Renata had been saying for years that if we ever divorced, she would leave me with nothing. I wasn't going to let that happen. I had records of all the money I had contributed to the marriage and how my income had funded the lifestyle she led, including her shopping and constant luxuries. I didn't want to hurt her, but I wasn't going to let her hurt me either. However, that's when life took an unexpected turn. 2 months after our separation, the company where Renata worked announced massive layoffs. The recession had hit the luxury sector hard, and the company was downsizing. She was one of the first to lose her job. Her marketing position, with a company car and expense account, disappeared overnight. A week later, I received a message from her. She asked if we could talk. I agreed to meet her for coffee, but in a public place. I wasn't naive. When she arrived, I was struck by how much she had changed. The designer clothes and flawless makeup could no longer hide the dark circles under her eyes or the exhaustion in her face. She had always been a thin woman. Now she looked frail, as if she could break at any moment. For an instant, I felt a pang of sadness. After all, I had loved her for 8 years. Seeing her like this didn't bring me the satisfaction I thought it would. "I've been thinking," she said, stirring her latte without looking up from the cup. "Maybe we were too hasty with the divorce." I almost burst out laughing. "You were the one who filed for divorce, Renata." "No, I was angry." She sighed. "You changed overnight." I didn't know how to react. I shook my head. "I didn't change. I just stopped letting you treat me like I was worthless." She flinched at those words. She was silent for a few seconds. Finally, she looked down. "I lost my job," she admitted in a low voice. "The severance wasn't much, and the real estate market is terrible right now. I'm going to have to sell the house." And there it was. Not an "I miss you." Not an "I realize how badly I treated you." Just a disguised request. She needed my money. "Sounds tough," I replied, finishing my coffee. "But it's not my problem anymore." Her eyes widened. "Henry, please. I have nowhere to go. My parents will be in Europe for the next 3 months. Beth's apartment is tiny, and I can't keep paying the mortgage on my own." I stood up from the chair. "You should have thought about that before you spent 6 years treating me like your doormat." I looked at her calmly. "You're smart, Renata. You'll figure it out." That's when she started to cry, right there in the middle of Starbucks. The old Henry would have caved in that very instant. "We could try therapy again," she said between sobs. "I'll change, I promise. I've already started seeing a therapist. She's helping me understand why I acted that way. It has to do with my childhood, with my dad's expectations." "Stop." I cut her off before she could continue. "I don't need to hear about your therapy breakthroughs. It's too late for us. It's never too late." She tried to take my hand across the table. I pulled it away before she could touch me. "People change, Henry. I'm changing. I can be a better person. We can have a different relationship. I watched her for a few seconds. You know what? I believe you. I saw a spark of hope appear on her face. I believe you'd make an effort for a while, until your life stabilized and you regained the security you lost. Then, sooner or later, we'd end up exactly where we started. She shook her head. No, this time would be different. It doesn't matter anymore. My voice was calm. Because I don't want to get back together with you. Not now, not ever. Her expression completely crumbled. I think it was the first time in her life that someone she wanted didn't choose her. I still love you, she whispered. I shook my head slowly. No, you don't. I didn't say it with anger or cruelty, just with absolute certainty. You miss the stability I gave you, the financial support, knowing I would always be there for you. That's not loving me. I walked out of that Starbucks feeling lighter than ever. The next day, my lawyer called. Renata was suddenly willing to accept a much more reasonable divorce settlement. Funny how things change. The divorce was officially finalized 4 months later. Renata had to leave the house. She couldn't afford to buy out my share, and frankly, I didn't want to live in a place filled with such bitter memories. We sold it at a small loss due to the market conditions. We split the money as agreed, and we each went our separate ways. Over time, I heard through mutual friends that she had moved into a modest apartment in a much less exclusive neighborhood. She eventually found another job, but at a much smaller company with a significantly lower salary. Her Instagram, which for years had been filled with luxury vacations, designer shopping, and posts tagged blessed, was practically abandoned. There were no more perfectly staged photos to project an ideal life. No more posts boasting success disguised as gratitude. I'm 35 now. I'm single, though I've started dating again. Taking it slow. The divorce was finalized 6 months ago. I bought a smaller house in a neighborhood I really like, close to my friends. For a while now, I've been seeing Vivian, a 33-year-old pediatric nurse with a very sharp wit and a kindness so genuine that Renata could have never faked it. We're still in the early stages, but everything feels surprisingly simple, natural, something I never felt during my marriage. Vivian laughs at my jokes. She tells me when I'm being an idiot, but always with affection. And most importantly, she seems genuinely interested in what I think and how I feel. The first time she asked me, "What would you like to do this weekend?" and then actually waited for my answer, I almost proposed to her right then and there. Last month, I received an unexpected message from Renata. She had heard from mutual friends that I was seeing someone new. "I hope she makes you happy," she wrote, but immediately followed it with another message. "My lease is up next month, and I'm having trouble finding another place. Could you co-sign a lease for me? Just as a favor. For old time's sake." Some people never change. I blocked her. Sometimes I think about how close I came to spending the rest of my life trying to please someone who was never going to be satisfied. And it all changed because of a comment I overheard by chance at a dinner party. But in the end, this was never just about standing up to Renata. It was about finding myself again, about remembering who I was before I got lost trying to meet someone else's expectations. A man who respects himself. A man who doesn't need anyone's approval to know his own worth. And that, gentlemen, is worth far more than any marriage, any house, or any lifestyle. Update 1. Wow, this blew up overnight. Thanks for all the awards and messages. To those asking if I would ever get back with Renata, the answer is no. Not a chance in hell. And for those who say I should have confronted her the same night of the party, you might be right. But looking back, I'm glad I didn't. I needed that revelation to sink in slowly so I could see the whole pattern clearly. Update 2. Since many of you have asked for news, I'll tell you that Renata wrote to me again last week. Her message said, "Have you been getting my messages? My housing situation is becoming desperate." I didn't reply. According to a friend of mine whose wife is friends with Beth, Renata's sister, she's been telling people that this is all just a phase and that sooner or later, I'll come to my senses. She can keep dreaming. Update 3. For those who say Vivian is just a rebound, it might look that way from the outside, but that's not how it feels. She knows the whole story of my marriage and divorce. We're taking things slow, and no, I'm not planning on jumping head first into another serious relationship. I've learned what happens when you rush things. Final update. Oh my God, RIP my inbox. I won't be able to reply to everyone, but I truly appreciate the support. And to the few people who continue to defend Renata, I acknowledge your right to a different opinion. But unless you've lived in a relationship with someone who, day after day, makes you feel like you're never enough, it's very hard to understand what that does to a person. This was never just about one comment. It was the result of 6 years of emotional abuse, sometimes subtle, other times not so much. And no, I'm not saying I was perfect either. I allowed that situation to go on for years. That part is my responsibility too. But I'm no longer going to feel guilty for finally deciding to stand up for myself. Thanks for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay up to date with more impactful real-life stories happening all around you.